Welcome into episode 254 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network. Sources Say is, as always, brought to you by our good friends at Justice Dental. Visit one of their two Lexington locations. That's on Blazer Parkway and Wellington Way by scheduling an appointment online at justicedental.com or by calling 859-543-0700. You can even send a text message to one of their friendly team members at the same number to ask a question or make an appointment. Now is a great time to schedule your dental cleaning. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Justice, and their team strive to provide you with good oral health and a comfortable environment. The Justice Dental team looks forward to seeing you soon. I'm your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very happy to be joined once again by the one and only Shawn Smith of Go Big Blue Country. Shawn, how the heck are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Jack. How are you today?
Oh, I'm excited that we have a little drama. It's been a kind of a quiet week just in terms of actual news. We did our preview of Ugonna Onyenso's decision last week. And I mean, within like 4 or 5 hours, he ended up making that decision public that he was going to be returning to the University of Kentucky. I'll get your thoughts on that and just what it means, significance of that, and just kind of carving out what this rotation is going to look like, especially in the front court. There's the conversation about Aaron Bradshaw saying he wants to play the 4. How does that play into it? But we finally get some drama. We get some news and some rumblings going on this week about the dynamic of Oscar Tshiebwe versus Hunter Dickinson, the possibility of Kentucky getting one of those two individuals. So I guess let's start there, Shawn. Hunter or Oscar? It's such a complicated question, one that I'm glad I don't have to answer as a head coach going through this process, knowing just how valuable Oscar Tshiebwe has been as a University of Kentucky Wildcat, while also understanding that he's going through the draft process and is prioritizing that. How do you juggle that decision while also having a guy like Hunter Dickinson, who has made it clear that he would like to be at Kentucky? It makes makes for a really difficult decision on Cal's end, but also makes for interesting debate for morons like you and me.
It's amazing how things change, right? Like talking a week ago, and we'd kind of ruled out that Hunter Dickinson even possibly being an option, and then here we are sitting here today talking about him again with Oscar Tshiebwe, and it's a difficult decision, right? Like Oscar, a two-time All-American, National Player of the Year, SEC Player of the Year, what he's done at Kentucky. On the other hand, you got Hunter Dickinson, who I think would elevate Kentucky offensively in some areas and would help with some. I know that they're both high usage guys, the way that they had been, especially with Oscar and stuff and things. But Dickinson was a really high usage guy at Michigan this past year, so. I think both, regardless of which one it is, if either one of them are at Kentucky, they'd have to play differently than they have in the past, given what Kentucky's roster is going to look like. But I'm going to lean Oscar just because of the familiarity with the program and being in the program for 2 years and knowing this fan base and the fan base falling in love with him and just what he does on the glass. And I think that he can impact the game different and probably in a better way with a lower usage rate than Hunter Dickinson can, just because of his ability to hit the offensive glass and finish plays around the rim. That's why I'd lean Oscar. Now, if you want to help with spacing, Dickinson's still going to do some stuff in the post, but he can step out and stretch the floor better than Oscar can. So that would help. But that's a decision that I am glad I do not have to make. But if Kentucky gets either one of them, I think Kentucky's, interior is looking really good next year. But I just feel like rolling it back with Oscar out of the two, honestly, would be my pick at this point.
And I guess it's more of a timing concern, because I think if you could guarantee you get Hunter Dickinson right now, if he were to commit tomorrow, I think that's a reality that Kentucky fans would probably be comfortable with, knowing that, okay, well, there's a chance that Oscar, you wait on Oscar and he ends up not coming at all. You would rather get one rather than neither. And if you know he's going to come right now, then that's obviously a scenario that Kentucky has to weigh. And it is one that they are weighing. I've been told that if Hunter went to Kentucky tomorrow and said, let's make this happen, I'm ready to commit, Kentucky would take his commitment. And I think that's news. Like that is worthwhile and something to keep in mind, because I think that's also a tell of where they are thinking things are trending with Oscar Tshiebwe. If they were operating under the assumption and had the impression on Oscar's side that there was a significant chance that he was coming back, I think they would tell Hunter thanks but no thanks, considering the other options Hunter has. Maryland's making a strong push. He's visiting Kansas on Thursday. I'm told those are the two leaders in his recruitment right now. Obviously, Maryland being kind of the NIL perspective, they're ready to kind of throw the bag at him. Kansas being the national title contender and kind of being able to offer the exposure at a blue blood that he's looking for on that end. I think those are the two favorites right now. But Hunter has made it clear to Kentucky that he would like to be at Kentucky if things worked out in that direction and they did decide to move on from Oscar Tshiebwe. But it's a timing decision on that end, Shawn. Hunter's not going to wait around forever, and also Kentucky's not going to wait around forever for Oscar. So it makes for a really tricky timeline on John Calipari's end.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to add. Like, if Hunter wanted to commit tomorrow, then my pick would be Hunter Dickinson. Like, I think that you go with whoever, like you said, the timing, whichever one has the better timing in this situation. I think Kentucky rolls with that. But I was just coming from a familiarity standpoint of playing in this program and knowing what it takes. I think there's a significant advantage for Oscar having done that for 2 years, having been a part of this program 2.5 years, going back to that COVID season too. So I think that there's some legs to that as well and a benefit there for him. But either one Kentucky gets, if that's how it works out, Kentucky's going to be fine at that spot given what they have to roll around it. And I think that Ugo coming back is a big piece and helps in that area. And then you got Bradshaw there at the 4. It's amazing how once we got off that podcast last week, just all the news decided to go. Like everything that we've been talking about, if they had waited maybe just another hour, we were able to talk about it. But we kind of had the lead on it, and then the news broke.
It is what it is. And I guess the concern on Kentucky's side, and just talking to people around the program and that have talked to Hunter and know how what his mindset is right now, he has informed Kentucky that he would like to be here. That's a fact. They're also concerned I said on the show a couple weeks back when Hunter even popped up as a possibility that they were moving forward cautiously optimistically, like that they liked what they had heard, but also understand that there's a lot at play with NIL, and they understand that he could make a ton of money wherever he goes, and that by going to a blue blood program like the University of Kentucky and having them say, hey, we want you here, let's bring you in. Here's what our typical NIL pitch is. We're not going to make any guarantees, and that's something Kentucky's made clear. But here's what a player of your caliber could probably make here in Lexington. They're worried that he's going to take that information and go straight back to Maryland or Kansas or wherever and say, this is the going rate for me, match it, or I'm going to Kentucky, and kind of using the other schools against each other for leverage. So Kentucky likes where things stand with Hunter, but at the same time know that they're not going to get used either. So they're treading lightly in that direction as well, that they understand that this could be a leverage play as well. And again, I've heard that Maryland and Kansas, Maryland probably the leader from just an NIL perspective and being home, DMV area, all of that, while also Kansas has the blue blood factor that he's also, that appeals to him as well. But watch out for NIL and just the leverage play. Kentucky isn't going to get used in that regard either. And unfortunately, that's kind of just the nature of the beast. It feels like he is going to all the big blue blood programs and trying to drum up interest only to go back to Maryland and have them say, cut me a check for X number of dollars and we've got a deal. So he's visited Maryland. He's visited Georgetown. He's visiting Kansas on Thursday. Things could move rather quickly. I know that there's the talk that he wants to commit at the end of this week. That hasn't been shut down completely. But I will also add that Oscar Tshiebwe is not in a position to make a decision imminently. Like, he has NBA workouts scheduled. Like, talking to people, like I talked to his agent this afternoon, and they said, I don't know how you could even come to that conclusion when he has NBA workouts scheduled in May. So if you're waiting, if it's going to be a one or the other game and kind of this deadline at the end of the week thing, Oscar's not in position to make that type of guarantee, because his first and foremost priority is to go pro and see if he can live out his NBA dream. So if it does come down to time, I don't think Oscar is going to be able to provide that for Cal, Shawn.
Yeah, and to me, the only way Kentucky loses in the situation is if they get neither, right? Like if they're looking up in late May and Hunter Dickinson somewhere else and Oscar Tshiebwe is playing professional basketball in some capacity, like, or for maybe the part that nobody wants to talk about is in another college basketball jersey. I don't expect that, but I'm with you though. Like I feel like the time frame here is that it kind of seems like the ball is in Hunter's court, right? Like if he decides, hey, I want to come there, can we make this work? Then there's probably that shuts the door on Oscar Tshiebwe for a possible third year at Kentucky. Because I mean, if you're Kentucky, you have to take the one that wants to come, and whoever says it's me, I want it, you got to take it because they're two really good players. They do different things, but I could also envision a scenario here where getting Hunter Dickinson and getting a change of scenery and something different could benefit Kentucky. It could be a different approach. I think the fan base to me would be mixed on this. I don't know what the comments look like, but I'm sure there's some saying Oscar, of course, Oscar. And then there's others that are saying Hunter Dickinson. I just think that that's the divide we have. Whichever one Kentucky gets, I think Kentucky's going to be fine on the interior. But it is it's definitely an interesting situation to follow, and it does have some drama to it.
And I guess my concern with it is just from an outsider's perspective and why I kind of think, again, this is just my knowing what I know and an outsider's perspective, kind of putting everything together. Part of me thinks that Kentucky and Oscar are playing chicken with one another, that they, Oscar, when the offseason began, his agent and the people around Oscar kind of say, here's what we're looking for if we want to come back to Kentucky, take it or leave it. Kentucky says, we're not going to do that here. We're not reaching any demands. Like, just because that's what you made this past year or what you're looking for in a return doesn't mean that we're going to guarantee that you may by coming back to Kentucky. We know we have the best platform in branding opportunities than anywhere else in college basketball. If you think you can get that, then by all means come back. But we're not going to play this back and forth game of, we're not going to negotiate. Like this isn't a negotiation. This is, if you want to come back, it's going to be for the betterment of the team. We're not going to guarantee minutes, touches, role, all of that stuff. That's just not a game Cal is willing to play this offseason and this time around. And I think the Hunter Dickinson situation, it almost feels like as much as Hunter may be using Kentucky as leverage, that Kentucky could also be using Hunter as leverage to just say, we have another really, really viable option. Like we have another person, an All-American caliber guy that has expressed interest in coming to Kentucky. We're not going to be held hostage by you, Oscar, or the people around you that want to make decisions. And I think that's kind of the match that we're kind of seeing, the tennis match that we're seeing. Oscar's people want one thing. Kentucky is not willing to do that, but also knowing that Oscar's going to make more at Kentucky than he will anywhere else. Definitely more than he's going to make in the pro on a two-way. He's going to make $500K on a two-way deal in the NBA. I mean, Kentucky he'd surpass that by quadruple in Lexington next season. So I think it's kind of one of those back and forth chicken games that I know Kentucky would take a Hunter's commitment today because they understand the value that he'd be able to bring, but also kind of hoping that Oscar and the people around him kind of come to their senses and know that the draft feedback isn't going to be what they're hoping for. The NIL elsewhere, if he were to hit the portal or anything like that, that's not going to be what he's looking for. And when push comes to shove, a reunion would be made in that way. I think that's just outsider's perspective looking in. That's my read on the situation, just my hunch.
Yeah, Oscar is who he is at this point as a professional prospect. And coming back to Kentucky for another year doesn't change that because he's going to be a year older and things. So, like, he knows what those evaluations are going to be and what those workouts are going to be. People have seen him. So I think that it all comes down to, does he want to go through that process? Does he have some hope that there's going to be a team that takes a two-way deal? But like you said, that two-way deal, it's still significantly less money than what he would make at Kentucky. Heck, he made that in like a week in the Bahamas back in the summer. Like,
he did. I mean, he literally did.
If not more. So, I mean, to me, I think it's a no-brainer if money is the driving factor here for Oscar. I think that returning to Kentucky for a third season is the right thing to do. In Kentucky's stance, though, I think the right thing to do is to take the guy that decides to do it first, because you can't be sitting here. Neither one of those guys is going to feel sorry for you in June if they're not on your roster, and you're sitting there looking at a vacant spot on the interior that someone else has to fill. You fill it, and you got to worry about yourself here in this moment. Like, Kentucky's been good to Oscar for 2 years. If Kentucky can get Hunter Dickinson, you take him. If Oscar wants to be here, I think you take him. Like, I just think that that's the decision that has to be made.
Yeah, it's tough. I guess how, knowing what we know now that Ugo's back, Ugononye. So, I mean, literally hours after we did our last show, or we said it's coming down the pike, be ready for it. Ugo will be back in Lexington. He ends up announcing that he's back later on in the evening. How does that factor into what Kentucky is looking for in the front court, while also factoring in Aaron Bradshaw very clearly putting on his Instagram page that he would like to play the 4? Like, that's the position he wants to play in Lexington. How do you navigate those waters, having Ugo back officially while also factoring in kind of the role that Aaron Bradshaw would like to play?
Well, I think what it did is it gives Kentucky options for what they do add. They don't have to go get a rim protector anymore. That doesn't have to be a part of it, because we know that Ugo's going to fill that role. Now, if Ugo's able to play a higher number of minutes like we expect him to be able to do, and we expect him to play those minutes this year, then he's going to protect the rim for Kentucky. So you're not having to just look for a rim protector. If he had not been on this roster, Kentucky was primarily looking at what? A shot blocker of some kind, someone that could affect the game with his length at the rim. You don't have to do that now. That's why I said it's appealing for Oscar to come back as long as Ugo is part of the package. Mm-hmm. There. The same thing with Dickinson. Like, to me, Hunter, if I do think Kentucky would get better defensively at that spot with Hunter Dickinson, just because of the added length that he has on his frame. Now, he's not a much better defender than Oscar, but when you're 6'9", you're comparing it to 7 foot, 7'1", you have some added length there that's just going to make you longer and harder to score over than Oscar is. Oscar at 6'9" is undersized at that spot. At least Dickinson has the frame to be disruptive at that spot too. So I think just Ugo coming back, it gives Kentucky some security and kind of what they can target here. Let's say it's neither one of these guys. Let's say that Dickinson goes to Maryland, and let's say that Oscar decides to pursue a professional basketball route. Then Kentucky looks at the portal again, and they kind of can get creative with what they want to add. Do they want to add a guy at the 4 that can stretch the spot there? I don't know. Like, do you bump Bradshaw to the 5 if needed when you're doing some things? But still, I don't know. There's a lot of decisions that John Calipari has to make, but Jackie has options. Like, Ugo coming back, I thought gave him options. That's what I thought was so important about that decision.
Is that a bad thing? You know, like, you might have to completely change your style of play, but you don't have to go find just this anchoring big in the portal. You know, if it's not going to be Hunter, if it's not going to be Oscar, you don't have to go find a big plotting 7-footer just for the sake of doing it. You can go find a versatile kind of strength, brute force kind of guy, a guy who can play the 3 or the 4, or have a face-up game at the 4, whatever. It does allow you to kind of play, or put Justin Edwards at the 4. Like, if you could get, and I've talked to Justin's people, they're comfortable playing the 4. I know we've gone through the whole back and forth with Chris Livingston and how he wasn't comfortable playing the 4 position and all that this past season. You have it not on record, but from Justin's people, that if Cal thinks it's best for him to play the 4 as a versatile kind of mismatch kind of guy, they're cool with it. I mean, he's very content with who he is as a basketball player and what he plans to bring to the table. He knows he can make an impact at any position, 2 through 4. So that also kind of plays into this. Do you then recruit just another pure wing, or do you go get another Jacob Toppin-esque kind of guy? It does allow Cal to get – I don't think that there's a desperation factor that I think on paper it seems, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that was the importance of that decision, and him returning a week ago was, one, you run it back with a guy who's been in your program for a year, been here since August. And I think that's the appeal to having Oscar Tshiebwe too. I think that – look, Ugo was here, but he's still a mystery, right? Like he's still this guy that going into next year that I still view as a freshman entering next season because we didn't see much of him. We saw him in limited action in the non-conference, and we saw him a little bit against Alabama, and then not again. Maybe a few minutes in the Georgia game at Rupp Arena, but other than that, we're kind of still out in the unknown area about what he can be. And I think that that's exciting. Like, that's exciting about all these guys, like DJ Wagner, Rob Dillingham, Justin Edwards. There's all this buzz around them because of the potential and the upside. I think you can throw Ugo in that category as well. So I do think that it gave John Calipari some options to kind of piece this roster out in the interior how he wants. But to me, Oscar Tshiebwe, Hunter Dickinson, either one that you add, I think Kentucky's going to be a preseason top 5 team with everyone's on the roster. I don't know if one of them sways it the other way or not. Like, I think that you just about view Kentucky the same. They would do some things differently, especially offensively. Not much would change defensively at that spot, but offensively, I think that they would do some different things. I think you get a better passer in Dickinson than what Oscar is. I think that he's a guy that can make some plays and stuff out of the post that Oscar cannot do. But you also lose that guy that just cleans up literally every single rebound. So there's positives to it and there's negatives to it. I think that they're two entirely different players that are high usage rates the last couple of years, but either one of them at Kentucky would have to do less than what they did this past season. And I think that's the thing that you look at here. Who's willing to do less and fit into whatever their role is going to be on this team? If it's Hunter and he's willing to sacrifice and do some things, then I like it. If it's Oscar, I like it too. I like both guys.
Yeah, looking at the comment feed and some of the questions, Richie Lanza asked Mackenzie Mbako update. A couple of people asked about Mackenzie. Kentucky is not going to be pursuing Mackenzie.
Jack is gone. Not sure what happened there. So Jack will be in here soon. But as he was saying there, that Steven?
Yeah, we're working to get him back.
Okay.
Jack is still working on some Wi-Fi issues in his area. So
go figure. The guy sitting in the car is the guy that has the good connection in the last couple of weeks. What are the chances of that?
We got him back though. We got him back.
Okay, because. Nice magic trick.
And he's gone again. Just wanted to pick it up from there. And Mbako, I noticed somebody said he might go to Louisville. I'm being in Louisville, being surrounded by Louisville fans. They're pretty excited about what they might have in store for next year. Just until Jack gets back. What do you think? What do you think about that? I mean, is Louisville back as a rival? Because I feel like we've kind of missed that.
I think the Louisville being decent or even relevant is good for the state. It's obviously good for that rivalry and things. But yeah, Jack was talking that Kentucky's not going to make a play there, and I don't think that that's a surprise at all. I don't think that was even a play at all when all that broke a week ago with him. Requesting out of his letter of intent and things like that. I just don't think that situation makes any sense at this point, given what Kentucky's had in the front court. And Steven, you don't want to go after a guy like that and then have one of your guys that you have in the fold request out of their letter of intent. So there's that. Like, once you get through that signing day and a guy signs elsewhere that you have recruited and you've taken another guy, it kind of makes it difficult and messy, in my opinion. But look, Louisville, Kenny has an approach right now that I think that he's trying to do everything it takes. I mean, when you win 4 games, you kind of want to do anything you can, right, to get it right and get it right quick. Like, 4 games at Louisville, that's not acceptable. And I know that it was a rough year, and they will be better than what they were. But
maybe even
definitely
even win 8.
Yeah, 8, right? As long as it's not the one at the Yum Center at some point, whenever that schedule comes out. But no, I do think that game.
I'll just say this real quick. The Louisville fans are treating Mbako as like a recruiting win over Kentucky, which I think that's funny. Especially as hearing you guys talk about that wasn't really
no. And that recruitment on Kentucky's end stopped a long time ago. and things. So, I mean, that's at one point, that was a guy that was on Kentucky's radar and near the top of it. And now could be playing up the road. You got Sky Clark. I mean, there's a lot of storylines there that I think that Louisville fans, and it makes it interesting. But Kenny doing everything he can to get that right and right that ship and put it sailing in the right direction. And look, after you win 4 games, you got to try anything you can. And that would be that's a significant win for them if that's where it goes.
They're getting really, I'll tell you this, they're getting really cocky here already. I mean, a lot of confidence for a team that won just 4 games. It's amazing. And then they're looking at their recruiting and things can change fast in the transfer portal era, but I don't know.
I mean, we know it didn't work out for Kentucky 2 years ago, but after that 9-16 year, Kentucky hit the portal hard, and for the regular season, they got it right and got those guys and had Oscar, had Xavier and Kellen Grady. Like, we know that the transfer portal can change things for you quickly and rapidly. So Louisville's hoping to grab onto some of that, being in the ACC. I mean, Mbako going from Duke, if he ends up at Louisville, it's definitely an interesting dynamic, and that's the world we live in today, Stephen. Somebody can be out of their letter of intent and playing somewhere else in 2 weeks, and some of those moves significantly change the landscape of college basketball. Some of them don't, and the portal is one of those at play here that we're talking about with Hunter Dickinson at Kentucky. A week ago, me and Jack weren't even kind of factoring that in as even an option. We thought that Zoom meeting was kind of just a fill it out type situation. Then you kind of get to a point, here we are a week later, talking about it being a viable option for Kentucky if they want it to be. So things change quickly this time of year, especially in Lexington. And Kentucky's roster looks like it's starting to at least have some scenarios play out with Ugo coming back. And I thought that was a massive get for Kentucky. I know Jack probably want to talk a little bit more about that whenever he gets back in here. Hopefully he gets back in here. Is there anything else in the comments?
There's a lot and a lot of participation going on over there. Somebody said we need Reeves to come back and one big man. Okay, so with that, Onyenso playing as a big, I mean, I do like his shot blocking ability. I like his jump shot. We might have Jack back, but as I send it over to you, Sean, I'll get Jack back in. But does having Onyenso, what kind of role do you see him playing? I don't know if he's somebody who's gonna, shut down a lot of guys on the defensive end. I mean, he's a good rim protector, and I like having somebody back there because the way Cal wants to play defense, it'll make a difference. But I'll hang up and listen.
Perfect. So to me, with Ugo, as Jack's getting back in here, to me with Ugo, I was nervous if Ugo was going to be the only option Kentucky had at that position. Like if Kentucky went all in on Ugo being their guy, I was concerned about it, just given that there is an unknown there. And I thought that was a risky play. I mean, it's a risky play when you're talking DJ Wagner, Rob Dillingham, and a young backcourt, right? That's why there's an importance of having Antonio Reeves come back to that backcourt. But I just thought it would be a risky move to just go with Ugo alone. But now that Ugo is in the fold, you have the ability to add someone else to that spot. And if you can add a guy like Dickinson or add Oscar Tshiebwe back for a third year, I think, one, it makes the job of Ugo easier, and it kind of allows him to transition into whatever role that ends up being. And Jack, I want your thoughts on this. Like, when college basketball seasons start, coaches have an envisioned role for each player on their roster. Not often do those things play out. They're usually shuffling by December because things don't play out the way you expect them, and guys play different roles. I just think it gives Kentucky options that Ugo is back, and it takes some pressure off of him having to be the guy every single second, every single minute at the 5. But when we're talking role, to me, a role for him is to block shots and help Kentucky be an elite transition team, because some of those shot blocks are going to lead to this Kentucky backcourt getting out and running.
Yeah, and Ugo did such great things in short spurts this past season, and I guess you have to utilize him. If you're going to have him, I think you got to utilize him and put him in position to succeed. And you're able to be more versatile and depending on how the rest of this roster shakes up and who else they add and the style of play, it will be very interesting to me. But I do think that no matter, am I even coming through right now? You just kind of blurred up on me, Sean. Am I even coming through?
Yeah, you're good. You're good on my end.
All right. Steven, take over for another very short bit. I'm going to go through my last backup plan here. Just
Okay.
I've got it. I've got him on my end.
Yeah, he seemed fine. But I guess he couldn't hear you or something. So
technical difficulties. The Sources Say podcast. We're going to change the name of this.
Yeah, let's don't. Yeah, this is what the show is. So, but a lot of people keep talking about Reeves, and I completely agree with that. I like those guards that are coming in next year, but if you don't have somebody who can light you up from three, at least somebody that they got to come out and guard. I'll tell you what, Wagner's shot looks okay. Dillingham's shot is okay. What did he shoot? 30-something% from the field. Some of that might be shot selection, but I feel like Reeves is the key. Like, he has to come back, and I know that Jack says that's very likely. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important decisions of the offseason is to get him back. And Steven, you're talking about a guy at Arkansas that scored 37 and he attempted 4 3-pointers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a guy that can score the basketball. It doesn't always have to come from the 3-point line. It can come from middle ball screen. It can come from him playing off the ball. I think the role that he had to play this year, he was asked to do more than what I thought he was expected of coming into Kentucky, given the injuries to Xavier and some other things there. I think that it kind of created maybe in the moment possibly an unfair thing for him, but in the long run, maybe a positive, because I think he's going to come back and be a player that has seen a lot of different things and experienced a lot of different things. He's played with the ball in his hands. He's played off the basketball at Kentucky. I think that better prepares him for another year in Lexington and on a roster where we expect DJ Wagner to dominate with the ball in his hands. And when Rob's in the game, he's going to have the ball in his hands. And if you need a guy that you can play through late with the ball, Reeves can do it. If you need him run off some of that floppy action, those baseline runners that Kentucky does, then you got him there too, doing some things. So I do think that he is very important and very vital to what Kentucky does long-term a year from now. And I think it's, to me, for both sides, I just think it's a no-brainer to work out another year at Kentucky. And I think that both sides view that way. I think Reeves can make a lot of money here next season. I think that he starts on this roster. I think he slides in and plays that other guard spot. And
that's going to be an interesting dynamic too, and how Calipari is able to manage that. Because,
well, you got Rob.
He wants to start, and that's going to be hard.
But to me, Rob is one of those guys that you see succeed in the tournament, that can come in and is dynamic and shifty and can hit shots and hit tough shots. He's also going to take some shots that's going to leave you scratching your head and probably wanting to throw your remote through the TV. Like, we know that that's going to happen, but you get the good with the bad with Rob. And when the good is good, it's really good. Like, he's shifty, he's dynamic, he's electric. And I think that that's going to be exciting for Kentucky fans. But I think Reeves can be the steady hand that Kentucky needs, that late in games that Kentucky goes to and they need a bucket and some things like that. But, I mean, look in the highlights you're pulling up here. I mean, Rob's shifty. Like, Rob, I mean, he thinks he's that guy, and he plays like that guy. And there's, to me, the difference with this group coming in, Steven, this is from a collective whole. This is from DJ to Rob to Justin to all of them. They not only do they look the part, they act the part. They talk the part. And you heard it at McDonald's. And the years that Kentucky's guys have gone down there and kind of spoke highly of what they can do and the confidence that kind of beams off them, those are the guys that it works out for at Kentucky. And I think that this group is set up to have some success, and I think that's why it's vital that they get a veteran guy back like Antonio Reeves in the backcourt.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, we had Jack. See,
we're getting a little bit of everything on this show today. A little bit of everything.
It's been good. But yeah, I mean, I think I left this comment up because I completely agree with this. I mean, that class that Cal brought in for his first season, if they needed a shooter, I know they ended up having to settle for Darnell Dodson, he was fine, but what a difference. Jody Meeks, I mean, that team might go 40-0. They've become practically unguardable. And if Reeves does what, and like you said, it's not even just hitting threes. It's like he's dangerous because he can hit threes, but because he can put the ball on the floor and hit that smooth runner that he has. So, I mean, I totally agree with this comment here that bringing Reeves back could be just as big as if you return Jody Meeks. Not that I would compare them.
No.
I thought Meeks maybe did a better job of creating his own shot from three. And they are kind of different players. Meeks maybe just a little bit better. But as far as somebody who we've seen able to light it up, as long as it's not the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament.
And if that scenario had played out in 2010, right? Like Meeks would have taken fewer shots a year later. His role would have changed, but what he performed and the things that he did well wouldn't have, like shooting the basketball. That would have been the role for him. That team would have pushed Darius Miller to the bench, and you would have pulled Miller off the bench, which then makes Kentucky deeper. That's the case with this, in my opinion, is it allows a guy like Rob to kind of come in and if Rob starts, if he comes off the bench, if it's Justin, like it doesn't matter. Like it gives Kentucky some depth and some options and a different look that you can put a lineup out there that even if DJ's not a part of it, you want to throw Rob with the ball in his hands with Reeves and with Justin and whatever else Kentucky wants to do. I just think it gives Cal options, and I expect Reeves to be back. I know Jack and stuff has talked about that in recent weeks, and that's one that we're following here. And he made that decision early to test the waters and play out that process. And I would be shocked if he's not at Kentucky, just given the way that I think there's a perfect fit for both sides. Sixth man of the year in the SEC. I don't think that that's the role he would play in another year, Stephen. I think that the role would be starter from day one, just given the experience, because Kentucky needs that in its backcourt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with you guys that I think he's going to come back, which I mean, it's huge. And this is where people are kind of getting impatient, and there's a lot of, you all talked about it a lot last year. There's a lot of pressure in this class. Having somebody come back with leadership and somebody who's been through it is gonna be huge, especially somebody who's gonna start. You look at what that lineup could be. I mean, you're right. You have depth. I think Onyenso gives you great depth, and I like that. Cal is gonna let Aaron Bradshaw shoot the ball, because that's been one of my. Once I saw Aaron Bradshaw play, I was like, he needs to be like, he can shoot the three. Like, let him go. Let him. That's what he's gonna do in the NBA. So let him do it at Kentucky. I don't want to see him like Karl Towns winning a three-point shooting contest. After for a year, his family's like, Cal, we want him shooting threes, and he's like, well, he's not going to do that here. Which I get it. He wants them to build up other parts of their game, but Onyenso can shoot. Aaron Bradshaw can shoot. Kentucky's got some unguardable kind of players. Do you think though that how big is losing Chris Livingston? And I know that happened. You all said that's going to happen. It happened like immediately once we got done with the show. But how big is that?
Yeah, I'm mixed on that one as well. Like I do think that if Chris were to play a sophomore season at Kentucky, I think that you would see him. I think his numbers would go up significantly. I think he'd be a significantly better player than what he was as a freshman, just given the year in college basketball. But I don't think he's an impossible guy to replace, if that makes sense. And that's no knock on him. Like I would love to see Chris back, because I think that Chris can do some things, and his upside and stuff and progression from freshman year to sophomore year, I think would be a gigantic leap. it would not be the leap that Terrence Jones took or PJ Washington took. Like it would not be to me of that stature, just given what Kentucky does have coming in, and it's got some ball dominant guards. So the basketball is not going to be in Chris's hands as much. So maybe you're better suited for a guy that can maybe knock down some shots from that spot at the 3, and that's the other side of the Reeves coming back scenario. You can also throw DJ and Rob in there together and slide Reeves to the 3 alongside, Bradshaw at the 4. And you've got some shooters off the ball with guards that can get into the lane. I would have loved to see Chris at Kentucky another season. But to me, Stephen, that's not the one that I think that makes or breaks what Kentucky does in 23-24. That wasn't, to me, the decision. I don't even think that Ugo was that decision, honestly. I thought that Kentucky could have survived there with maybe a land in the portal or the return of Oscar or something different there. Like, I don't think that either of those decisions would have been fatal, but I do think that of the two, if we're talking Chris Livingston or Ugo, I think Ugo's the more important piece, just given that he does the one thing that nobody else on Kentucky's roster does, and that's protect the rim. And I think Justin Edwards is going to be a really dynamic player at that 3 spot. If they want to slide him to the 4, if you want to move him to the 2 with his size, I just think that he's a dynamic guy that's going to have the ball in his hands a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I do wonder, that I really thought that Cal gave him a chance to play at the 4 last year.
That's where I wanted him.
That's where you wanted him to. I know. And I thought that could have been another chance for that role this year, because, you start to you look at the roster. I mean, you look at who's going to play the 4. I mean, Aaron Bradshaw at 7 foot. Do you worry that smaller 4s are going to be able to go around him?
Yeah, but he has the length to be disruptive, and you've also got Ugo behind him, possibly as it stands right now when it comes to what's on this roster. My more of my concern with Bradshaw would be playing the 4 offensively and something off the bounce, and having to dribble and make some moves and stuff at that spot, because if you're going to play that spot, you're going to have to do that, Simon. I thought that's where Chris, that's where Justin, that's where some other guys that maybe can slide and play that role, if would fit it better. But Bradshaw has the ability to knock down some threes and do some things. And I think Jack is still having some trouble getting back in here. But Stephen, we'll carry it as is and do what we have to do to make this thing work. But Kentucky's a team that, and it's hard right now because we don't have the finished product, right? Like, we don't know, and that's going to be the fun episode. And I would say mid-May till 3rd week of May is probably when we know what Kentucky's roster looks like, given NBA decisions and transfer portal wrapping up and all that stuff. Like, we can probably look and get a clearer picture. But as it stands right now, I think Kentucky has a roster that I'm intrigued by. I think it's a better roster than what they had the last 2 years. Even, let's say Oscar's not a part of it. I just think overall, I think the talent and the things that they can do in the backcourt, like I've had multiple discussions with you that I thought Kentucky's problems the last 2 years was its backcourt failed them down the stretch. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that due to injury. We know Kaysen wasn't 100% in the NCAA tournament. He gutted out a performance against K-State and almost willed them to a victory. But Oscar had dominant numbers in the NCAA tournament, and it did not win them basketball games. Like, we were talking like first player since so-and-so and 50 years and this and that, and it didn't win you games, which goes to show you that guard play is what separates you. Right. And I think that Kentucky has a group of guards coming in that when push comes to shove by the end of the year, they have that dog in them. And I think Kentucky's backcourt will be significantly better and more prepared to kind of handle the weight of the postseason. That's why I'm okay with another year of Oscar Tshiebwe or Hunter Dickinson coming in Kentucky with a high usage rate, as I just think that those usage rates aren't going to be there because those guys in the backcourt are going to dominate the ball in their hands and make plays.
Jack just sent us a message. He's literally driving to get service. So it's I love it. Because I know he's got some more scoop that he wants to get to. So he's like trying to make it happen.
Yeah, that's what the sources do. They say, and they go wherever they have to go to say.
Right.
Jack has been with me on the road, and me looking for a McDonald's to post a story in 2020, right before COVID shut down the season. So I know this is no surprise that Jack is trying to find internet somewhere.
He really makes Shelbyville sound like it's just out in the middle of nowhere, which it's not. So, but
there's got to be a McDonald's somewhere. You can't go wrong with McDonald's Wi-Fi.
No, there's going to be a Starbucks somewhere, right?
Yeah, Starbucks, McDonald's, something.
But yeah, we're just holding it down here. Let's see. There's these comments over here. Drew Franklin says McDonald's has the best Wi-Fi, so he's on board with that as well.
I agree.
You know, there's this. I mean, I don't know that it's like the media's job to do this, but I will say that, like, you know, there's becoming like where you start looking at the last several seasons, and that we did it all last year, where, man, it's like this, you got your guys. Now this is a season that you need to produce. And again, I'm not going to say Final Four or championship or bust, but how about you do one of those? Like, how about you win the Champions Classic? How about you beat a couple top 25 teams this year? How about winning the SEC, or winning a few games in the SEC tournament? You know what? It feels like it's been a long time since we saw Kentucky play in an SEC championship game. Seeing Kentucky play on Selection Sunday, and that was a very regular thing for a while. So do like one of those. Like, give Kentucky fans something to cheer for, because it's been like 0-4 in like everything since 2020. At least they won the SEC regular season that year.
You know, this is a program that honestly has not fared well in the non-conference in not just the last 2 years, but really in years. Like you go back to the COVID season, they didn't beat anybody hardly that year. But then a year ago, they lose to Duke in the Champions Classic, or 2 years ago, they lose to Duke in the Champions Classic. They have their other moments there. They did beat Carolina in Vegas. They beat Kansas on the road. I mean, they've had success there, but in those early non-conference portion of the schedule, this is a program that's not done well in a long time. Even the Maxey and Hagens and Quickly team lost back-to-back games out there. Didn't they drop both of those games, Ohio State and Utah, if I'm not mistaken, in that season? And I'm going to pass this back off to you, Jack. Let's stop talking negative, because you're a warrior. You have driven yourself to somewhere to where hopefully you can throw some scoop out here.
Yeah, what a freaking there's a service outage in clearly just where I live, because I'm at some random park down the street, so this is just fantastic. But yeah, I had some stuff I wanted to get off my chest. Instead of just giving up on the rest of the show, I said, screw it, I want to make this happen. So let's start the show by discussing the possibility of Antonio Reeves coming back. I had a very nice conversation this afternoon that makes me feel quite warm and fuzzy about the possibility of Antonio Reeves coming back. Shawn, he's going through the draft process. He has not talked to any teams as of yet. They're not even. He has no feedback yet. Like, they're not even in the process of scheduling workouts or anything like that. But Antonio is operating under the assumption that he's going to go learn what he needs to fix going into this upcoming year, and in hopes of returning and becoming a first-round pick in a very weak 2024 draft class. Yeah. I think it's an amazing mindset. It's something that I think Cal has been rooting for. He's kind of indirectly told Antonio, hey, man, we want you to be part of this July global jam up in Toronto. We want you to be kind of the face of the organization. We know we have 5 incoming freshmen. We need you to be a complementary piece to that next season in our backcourt. You're going to be an unbelievable, valuable addition and returning piece to what we're working with. And I think Kentucky's trending in a very, very nice spot to get Antonio Reeves back. NIL has to be right. They're not going to make any guarantees, obviously, but they understand that they were trending in the right direction to close out this past season. The 37-point game in Fayetteville, things were cooking at the right time. Obviously not at the last time in the round of 32, but enough to where he is now a known commodity. That's going to push him over the edge in terms of NIL versus what he'd make. He's not going to go to the G League and play it with the Fort Wayne Mad Ants. Like, that's not something he has any interest in doing. And I think when push comes to shove, he'll be back in Lexington. So we wanted to end the show on a very positive note after a really, really crappy couple of minutes.
Yeah, take it from someone who had frozen food at the G League. That's not what you want to do, right, Jack? Like, we don't want to be eating with knives and things there like we did in Greensboro. But no, like, we actually talked about that while you were gone. Somebody asked about how important is it for Antonio Reeves to come back, and I started talking about, to me, with what Kentucky has coming in with its backcourt, Jack, with DJ and Rob and Justin, and they have talent. But that leadership role, that guy that's been through it, and I keep going back to that Arkansas game where he scored 37 and only made 2 threes. Like, that's a dude that can score the basketball. And you add that to your roster, it gives you flexibility. You can bring a guy like Rob off the bench and kind of be your offensive guy that just comes in. And look, Rob's going to have his moments. We know that. He's going to come in, he's going to hit back-to-back shots, and Rupp's going to go crazy. And then he's going to shoot one, and people's going to want to throw the remote at the TV at times. But it gives Kentucky options. It gives Cal flexibility. I would expect Reeves to start if he comes back for another season, and I think it would make a ton of sense. He'd be the veteran guy in that backcourt along whoever, and it gives Kentucky another guy that not only can play off the ball, but what do you think about this? I think this season at Kentucky for Reeves, he was asked to do some things that maybe he wasn't expected to do when he went through the recruiting process and made the decision to come to Kentucky, especially having to play point guard late in the season. And maybe in those moments it wasn't the best thing, but having gone through that, how much more dynamic does that make him now coming back, a guy that has played that role and done those things? It gives Kentucky options, and it gives you another guy that can play with the ball in his hands or run off that floppy action that Kentucky does, and it just gives Cal options and flexibility and adds depth to Kentucky. I think it's an important one. I think it's one of the biggest ones of the offseason is his decision to return or not.
And I appreciate Cal's mindset with this and you know, his approach with the family and just telling Antonio, I want you to go get this feedback. Teams like you. I mean, there's a lot of interest in Antonio Reeves as a dynamic scorer. He does things that nobody else in college basketball can do. I mean, he's a truly elite 3-level scorer. Yes, he struggles on the defensive end. Yes, there are some consistency struggles that need to be addressed and need to be worked on. But he does things that nobody else can do. And when push comes to shove, that is unbelievably valuable for what this team is looking for next season. And just from a veteran standpoint, when you have 4 guys that are going to play, 4 freshmen that are going to play a lot of minutes, you have to have vet leadership from somewhere. And that's part of the reason why even if CJ Frederick struggles with injury or doesn't play often or whatever the case is, you need those types of guys in the locker room to complement young pieces. And that's something that Antonio's side is valuing a lot as well. They know that he's needed next year to, if Kentucky wants to take off, if that plane takes off and soars the way I think Cal hopes, you got to have leadership from somewhere. And I think that's a conversation Cal has had with Antonio and his family. And it just said, look, you have a complementary from an age standpoint, from an experience standpoint, from a talent standpoint, you are the perfect complementary piece of what they're looking for. There's a reason that Cal has not gone after any guards in the portal, because they know Antonio is that guard. They don't need another guy. They feel that good about Antonio coming back. He's getting the feedback, and yes, if a team were to guarantee him the moon and things, then Cal will have to adjust accordingly. But there's a mutual understanding, even on Antonio's side, that he's not going to get drafted. He's just not. There's not going to be this lucrative guaranteed deal that come his way. It's just not going to happen. They know that there's going to be more money waiting for him in Lexington, and you know, Kentucky needs to show the love and show that we're going to make you the face of this program. We're going to put you in position to make a lot of money with NIL. No, they're not, but if there's a Jacob Toppin AT&T commercial possibility next season, Antonio can be that guy. Let him kind of be the face of the program and help him out, make it worth his while to come back to Lexington from a money standpoint, role standpoint, no guarantees, but he wants to be back. Just show him that love that he's wanted back, and I think it'll be done. I don't think there's any hesitation on Antonio's side that this will get done, and I think that's huge news.
It's massive news. Like it's we were talking about Chris's decision, to leave. I don't know if we got into that before you.
No idea.
So his decision to declare for the draft right after we ended the show a week ago, and I was and Steven asked me how big of a factor does that play with Kentucky, and I actually was talking that I thought the decision for Ugo to come back would be bigger than Chris's coming back, just given that Kentucky doesn't have that rim protector on its roster. And this is no knock on Chris. I just think the things that Chris would do and would love to see him as a sophomore at Kentucky. I just think that it's easier to replace some of those things than it is what Reeves does or what Ugo does or what Ugo can do on that upside potential. And that's kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to roster construction, right? Like you can, it's some guys, maybe it's easier to pitch in and feel what those guys did than it is other guys. And to me, Reeves is the guy that stands out and does things differently than anybody else that Kentucky could have in its backcourt. And that veteran presence is probably the deciding and pushing factor of why I'm such a big fan of another year of him at Kentucky. And I think that Reeves in himself would help take a lot of pressure off of Rob, off DJ, off these other guys in this backcourt, just given that he's gone through this, has a season at Kentucky, and just the flexibility that he gave Cal this year with Sabir out and with Kaysen banged up down the stretch. Like, the experience is a huge weapon, and the experience that he got playing different roles, whether it was the lead role or the off role, he went through a lot in that final 5 to 6 weeks of the season. And I thought he really grew up a lot in his one season at Kentucky. And I think another year, I mean, you're talking about to me, honestly, not just a sixth man of the year, I think an all SEC caliber guy if he comes back.
Yeah. I would expect that decision to be made at some point in May. Again, he still wants to work out for teams, still get he hasn't even gotten the paperwork back from the NBA that says, here's what you are as a prospect. So it's still early, but their mindset going into this process is, we know who we are as a basketball player. We know that I am not a draftable person right now. Like, we're not on any draft boards. Like, they're smart. They're a smart family. They know how they're, navigating these pretty difficult waters. They're excited about the possibility of, getting good feedback and just knowing what they need to work on. But everybody involved they have common sense. They know that the money's going to be right in Lexington. They know the value that he's going to bring, how necessary he is on next year's roster. I think when push comes to shove, everything is pointing to Antonio coming back, and that's just not even something that I'm even going to stress about anymore. And I think it's pretty clear with Kentucky's recruiting efforts in the portal, they're not going after any other primary guards, ball handlers, and none of that. I will say, going after guys like Harrison Ingram and kind of those versatile 4-3 kind of strong wings. Cal has expressed interest in those types of guys, and I think that is indicative of their mindset with Chris. And part of me, I've heard nothing to indicate that Chris is going to come back. There's a single person that's optimistic about that possibility. But he has made tough decisions in the past. When he decided to go to Oak Hill versus staying at Mutual in Akron, where he was putting up 35 points a game and 15 rebounds, he made the difficult decision to go get coached hard under a Hall of Fame coach in Steve Smith, a difficult place to play in Oak Hill in the middle of nowhere in Virginia, away from distractions. And I mean, you had to really get into the grind of that senior season to grow as a basketball player. And he did that. He made that tough decision. He also made that tough decision to go to Kentucky when everybody wanted him to go to Memphis and get as many touches as he wanted, or Georgetown, or even the G League. Take the easier path. He has taken the tougher path. But that's more so common sense talking and gut than how he's actually operating with this process. I've just heard nothing to indicate that he's even strongly considering a return. And everybody I've talked to would be absolutely shocked if that were to unfold. But I think it's just look at how Cal is recruiting potential Antonio Reeves replacements. He's not, versus potential Chris Livingston replacements. He is. I think just you can kind of get a look into Cal's mindset with who he's going after and who else. And I guess my next question for you, Shawn, do you think you need to continue doing that? Depending on what happens with CJ Frederick, and I feel like you gotta find a vet somewhere, and it has to be at that 3-4 spot to make me feel warm and fuzzy alongside Antonio Reeves.
Yeah, if you could get a 3-and-D guy, I think that's probably what you're looking at as the perfect filler for this roster to complete it, especially when it comes to what they already have. So I could see that being a role. Whoever it is, I hope it's a guy that can consistently knock down the three. I think that's important. You need another guy that can stretch the floor and do some things from that spot, but also have the ability to not only play the three, but maybe have the size and the frame to slide and play the four, but also a skill set that when you're required to put the ball on the deck, you can do it. And I think that's probably my one concern about Bradshaw playing the four would be him having to make some plays off the bounce and doing some things. So I do think that when you're talking about adding a portal piece, I do think that shopping and looking in the portal for a guy that can slide and have the versatility to play 3-4, but can shoot it and defend. And I mean, that's a hard thing to ask, right? Like I'm sitting here talking about a guy that can handle it, shoot it, and defend. That's a lot. But if you can get 2 of the 3, then I think that you look at it and say, okay, this guy fits. But obviously it all depends on what talking about Livingston and that decision. But ever since he announced that a week ago, I've kind of ruled him out of being on this roster next season. I've kind of just shifted my mindset to he won't be here. And what can Kentucky do to finalize and put all these pieces together?
And the fact that there was even a discussion because nothing about his statement indicated that he was even considering returning. I mean, it was like, on to the next. I appreciate it. It was a dream come true to come to Kentucky. I am going to explore the NBA draft. Everybody have a nice day. It was like, oh, we don't even know. Like, everything that I heard going into the process was that he was going to test the waters. But then when the statement came out, it was like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't sound
That's
like
not testing at all. That's jumping in the waters.
Sounds like he did test. Like the test was, I'm doing it. So it is what it is. Maybe his mind changes, and maybe the feedback is just so bad during the process that he says, "Oh man, maybe I jumped the gun with my optimism about myself and thinking that I was something better than I was at this point in my career." That could be a possibility, but I'll have to see it to believe it. Shawn, I guess before we get out of here, the question I have for you: it's been an unbelievably busy recruiting weekend for John Calipari. Made 4 stops in 4 days to go see 4 different recruits. Started out to see Flory Badunga, flew down to Texas to see Trey Johnson, then flew up to the Northeast, saw Ahmad Noel, teammate of Justin Edwards at Emotep Charter, and then went over the 15-minute drive, made that to go visit Billy Richmond, a 4-star wing in the class of 2024, while also obviously seeing DJ and Aaron and Justin in those stops as well. But clearly recruiting like a guy who's going to be here in the class of 2024 when that 2024-2025 class rolls around. So I thought that was pretty interesting that he's hitting the ground pretty hard right now, trying to get some pieces to kind of lay the groundwork of that 2024 class.
Yeah, that's encouraging to see, right? He's putting all that effort into that class. Also made a stop at an NBA game and watched Tyrese Maxey. So he seems to be energized and out doing what he needs to be doing and doing his job and going to work. And we know that they posted that coaching position and made it public and available. So we know that is in the works. And at some point we'll have that news too. Like, there's still a lot of things to fall into place over the course of the next month. And when you were out looking for signal or service, I was talking about that. I'm guessing mid-May is when we're going to be able to kind of sit down and really wrap this thing up and say, okay, this is what Kentucky's roster looks like. Are they a Final Four contender on paper? Are they a national championship contender on paper? Do they have enough to get over the hump and do some things? I'm putting, my birthday's May 12th. I'm saying somewhere after that week, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, that's usually when we can kind of sit down and go, okay, this is Kentucky's roster. This is their coaching staff. What do you think? And that's kind of how I'm viewing the timetable and the time frame for these decisions to play out.
And you brought up the coaching decision change and that job opening now for Cal staff. I've been digging all week long. They are not leaking that thing. I've been told that they have somebody in mind, and it's something that should be announced relatively soon. But I think Cal is trying to keep this very, very close to vest, and I have heard no updates whatsoever on an actual name of who they're leaning and all that. Maybe leak happens in the coming days, but the closest that I got to actual scoop on that is that we should be hearing something shortly. So I guess my question to you is, what are you hoping to see with that decision? Pretty interesting. The job application specified scouting, that Cal wanted somebody with an expertise in scouting. Admittedly, something that has not been good enough on this current staff and not taken seriously enough. Cal went out of his way to include that in the job description. I think there's a reason for that. I actually know there's a reason for that. What are you kind of big picture hoping to see out of this decision?
A guy that can kind of dip his feet into different pools on the staff. And that's what the job description stated pretty much, right? You're talking multiple roles. And to me, that means it's going to be somebody with some experience that's probably worn a lot of different hats at some point in his career. Has he been a head coach? Has he not been a head coach? He obviously has some experience in scouting at some degree, I would say. And whether that be, I mean, obviously we're talking game planning and things like that too. Like to me, that's going to be a vital thing for the staff and stuff. And you want to see these defensive numbers improve significantly too. Like that's something that's dipped in recent years. I know Tony Barbie handled a lot of that scout and stuff and game planning in the past. So is that something that Cal's looking for as well? To me, I want to see a guy that when we look at his coaching pedigree and we see, it doesn't have to be multiple stops, but stops where he's had some success and a lot of experience doing a lot of different jobs, whether that be on-court coaching, scouting, recruiting, it doesn't matter. But I think a guy that is diverse when it comes to what his jobs have been and a guy that has some fire about him. I think that's the thing that I'm looking for. And honestly, to do all those things that job description has, you got to have some fire about you and you got to have some motivation. And I think that's the thing that Cal's looking for. Is it going to be a familiar friend, someone he's familiar with? That's the look that Cal has went with multiple times. I don't know, Jack. It might not be this time. Like it might be a different route. It might be a guy that maybe someone else has referred to Cal.
That's where I'm leaning. I think there's a reason why. There's a reason why Josh Pastner leaked. There's a reason why Derek Kellogg leaked. There's a reason why the names that were kind of tossed out there is kind of, what would be the reaction of this? And Cal doesn't care about the PR of it, but from a common sense perspective, like I think he understands that the bringing in my buddies to keep modernizing this game and moving forward as the gold standard of college basketball, like I think he understands that that's not the way to go. And I think that there was some pushback, and I was told like during the process there was some like, dude, no, come on now, like some of the names that were being tossed around, not what we need to be looking toward. And I think that has pushed him to get a little bit more creative. What that creativity means, I have no idea, because I don't have any new options. I threw out the Link Academy head coach last show, and it didn't get much traction. There was some talk about that, but he always factors in ties and somebody to hit the ground running in Texas or in the Northeast, Philly, New Jersey area. But honestly, I wouldn't mind him. Cal has the Northeast locked up pretty tight, like the New Jersey area and the Philly area, like he has that on lock and key. Yeah, I'd like to go back to Texas, but with how many guys he's recruited out of Texas, he's kind of developed a pretty significant pool of connections down there. I'd almost like to see, I don't want to say a West Coast guy or a Florida guy or some, a different area that Kentucky hasn't necessarily been hitting. Maybe not West Coast, because Kentucky has really struggled hitting on West Coast kids, and maybe that's definitely not the path to go down, but to kind of add to the pipeline of different areas, and maybe, I don't know, that's kind of just thinking out loud here.
Is it bad that I'm not factoring recruiting into this one being a huge thing for me? Like, because when you got John,
I mean,
when you got John Calipari, you can recruit yourself, right? Like,
yes.
And we know at the end of it, like, I'm looking at this thing and saying, does Cal go an NBA guy? Does Cal go a guy that has had some run in the league with the modern basketball look and some things? And when it comes to scouting, and a guy that gets lost in film and gets lost in game planning and evaluating, like, that's where I think that you could get a significant thing on your coaching staff and a dynamic and something different, is a guy that enjoys digesting and breaking down film and not afraid to throw out ideas and scouts. And how about this too? Like, scout your own guys. This is what your weakness is. Scout your own guys and know what their weaknesses are and things. Like, there's so many tools and things that are available now to coaches in the game of basketball that you can never have enough. And if you can get a guy that has a ton of experience in a lot of different areas, I think that that's what you're looking for in this hire. And it doesn't have to be a guy that's a home run name that everybody knows. And as long as his pedigree is successful, and the people that he's worked for and the places that he's been have had success, I think that this could be one that Cal could get creative with. And I would love to see him not just look at college basketball, look in the NBA. Is there a guy in a franchise somewhere right now around the league that's just waiting for a greater role in some capacity? Is that something that this job could be for them? So I'm intrigued by it, and I want to see where Kentucky goes, with it. And I think we've lost Jack again. And maybe getting back to wrap this thing up.
I am not Jack Pilgrim, but we will try to get him back again. Credit Jack. Here he's back. He's on. Is this a different side of the car? I can't tell. Is that what happened?
Hey, Shawn, remember what happened with your phone last time?
Yep.
Overheated.
It's something you don't really understand until you truly experience it.
I mean,
that thing gets hot, doesn't it?
You just can't make this stuff up. I mean, at this point, I got nothing. What were you saying before I was so rudely departed once again?
I was saying that, is there a guy in the NBA somewhere that Cal could take a look at, that maybe a name that not a lot of people know around college basketball, but is just kind of waiting for that bigger role and that opportunity for his career to do? And look, I'm talking like a guy that scouts not just the opposing teams and game plans, but scout your own team too. Like, scout your own players and help these guys. And look, scouting your own players, I think, is such a significant thing to do. And, I've done it with my own kids, watching film and scouting and breaking down their weaknesses and their strengths. And I know that I'm sure that goes on in collegiate programs, but I just think getting a guy that loves to watch film and things like that, and is willing to grind for whatever that next opportunity is in his career, I think that's the perfect hire in this spot, because you don't have to go out and get a lead recruiter. You got a lead recruiter. You got the best in the game in John Calipari. You don't have to go get that. So check that box and completely throw it off the thing. And to me, connections are connections. And if John Calipari wants a guy in Florida and he's willing to put in the work, I think Cal can get a guy in Florida. If he wants to put in the work and get him on the West Coast, I think that Cal could swing that one too. But look at the NBA, where the game has, we know it's been modernized quicker than the collegiate game and stuff. And is there a guy that's in his late 30s or early 40s that has put in a ton of time, that has had a ton of success in a lot of different roles? Is that where John Calipari looks with this hire? And if he does, Jack, I think it shows some stepping outside the box and getting creative and maybe doing something that he's not accustomed to doing, which this many years into his career and this far into his tenure at Kentucky, I don't think would be a bad thing.
Yeah, and for all that Cal has done with putting guys in the NBA,
and the way he's given back to the league, I feel like there should be some return there. Like I mean,
take one out, right?
Even gave Kenny Payne a spot in the league, and he kind of presented that opportunity. It was a great match for the Knicks organization at that point. Like, I feel like that's the least that some giving NBA team would, kind of like the Liam Cohen model in football. Somebody that might not be ready for the big jump in the NBA, but somebody that is clearly proven that he has the goods from an X's and O's standpoint. You could get really creative. There's a lot of talent in terms of coaching and scouting and front office people in the league that there are some pots of gold to tap in. I think in some area with some franchise. There's got to be.
There are brilliant minds sitting on the end of a bench or the first row behind a bench with an iPad in their hand. There's some brilliant minds.
Yeah.
That I think that if given an opportunity or a chance, there's a lot of potential there. And look, those guys know the game just as well as anyone does because they evaluate it analytically and everything else and crunch numbers and break it down. And I think a numbers cruncher guy too could really do some things for this program, and just thinking outside the box. Like you've got your guys there. You've got Orlando Antigua, who we know is number 2, and you've got, John Calipari, as the head man, and Chin Coleman's there, and Bruiser's still in a role. Like, you're not lacking in that department. But if you can get a guy that does some things that maybe will challenge the entire staff as a whole to think outside the box and maybe try some new things and look, at one point, we knew that John Calipari was always ahead of the game in what was trendy. And I think there became a point where he wasn't ahead of the game when it came to what was on the floor in the game. Go get a guy that can maybe get you back ahead of it. And maybe Kentucky does some different things and steps out and takes a different model and approach to it. And I'm intrigued by it. Like, if he ends up going with a familiar face, then sure, you make it work. But I'm interested to see what Cal does with this spot, because I think it's an opportunity to think outside the box and do something different. And why not? Why not take a shot on somebody? And we'll see some names popping out at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah. Looking at the comments section, unfortunately, I haven't been able to get a lot of them because I have barely even been able to be on this show in the first place.
Are you on the other side of the car, by the way?
Of course I am, because I'm in the shade. I'm having to get as creative as I've ever been on this damn show. It's just what it is. Yeah, somebody said, I thought Jack was getting fiber. Yeah, I did too. I really did too. That would have been really great right about now, as I'm sitting at some Shelbyville downtown park. I don't even know where. I hope people don't call the cops on me because I'm some random stranger sitting in his car at a public park. I don't know. A couple questions. Andrew Bates asked about CJ. No official update on CJ. I was told that he's even considering overseas route and even if who would be interested in the portal and what kind of options would be there. I'm leaning more toward him returning to basketball in general, which I was not convinced of. To close the regular season, we were both in that locker room listening to him and watching him in tears talk about, his legacy as a basketball player, and said, I know I laid it all out there, and all those sorts of things. I am thinking, talking to people around CJ, that he is definitely getting that itch to play again. It's just about where, and a lot of questions like, okay, if he were to come back, what would his role be? And those sorts of questions are starting to come back because I think they're seeing the numbers crunch of where would he fit in and how many minutes would he be able to get. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Wouldn't rule out overseas, wouldn't rule out I think he's just kind of taking this day by day. People around the program thought at one point that they were feeling pretty good about him coming back, and it's kind of just gotten pretty quiet since then, which isn't necessarily a great thing for those hoping for him to come back. But I don't know. I think he's just kind of letting his body tell him what he needs to do. And it sucks because we didn't get to see CJ Frederick be CJ Frederick this past year. I don't think, Sean. I think that's something that I think even on his end, he'd like to see, prove that he can do it at this level, because there was so much doubt and, everybody calling him soft and all this nonsense about his game and all that he couldn't play at this level and all that. I think there's a part of him that kind of has that competitive factor of,
I want to prove that I can do it, while also acknowledging that there might just be a numbers crunch and he doesn't want to come back to play 3 minutes, you know?
Yeah, I think that he has an interesting decision as well. And if he's able to be healthy this offseason, I think that's a factor into it, because if he's able to go through the summer healthy and things, then it's been a while since he's been able to do that, right? Like he's rehabbed for a long, long time, and no one wants to go out the way he did. I mean, he played through a lot of pain there at the end of the year. A lot of dudes were on Kentucky's roster, and if you can get him in a role and add some more insurance, another shooter that can buy you some minutes if needed, then why not, right? Like there's going to be a spot on that roster. There's going to be available scholarships. Fill them. We used to talk all the time that Cal didn't fill his scholarships out. So if you can fill it with a guy like CJ Frederick, who I think can benefit your program, not just from an on-court role, but a leadership role off it as well and in the locker room, I think that it's a good thing for both sides.
John Evett says, Collins, please. AJ Stevens, any word on Collins? There was a rumor out on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this, about something about his grandfather passing. I haven't heard from them specifically or anybody around UK that brought up that possibility. If so, I mean, holy crap. I mean, that would just be a disaster and just one thing after another in his life. And I just couldn't even imagine that. I'm praying that that's wrong. That would be an absolute nightmare. But his decision is complicated. And people I've talked to around UK say that they would be absolutely shocked if he was back in Lexington. I am not expecting it in the slightest. I know it sucks because he is such a high potential guy, and it would suck to see him go to an SMU or a Houston or somebody down in Texas and have him explode and kind of finally unlock all of the potential that he has. But I think that there's just this understanding that, yes, he's developed a brotherhood and a bond with people around the program in Lexington, but it's just not the same as actually physically being there for your mom and your sisters and the people, your immediate family, your actual blood that desperately needs you right now. God forbid the news about his grandfather isn't true either, but if that's the case, even more so. I'm still not expecting Damien back, and I think that the staff is operating under that same assumption. Why has there not been an announcement yet? That I do not know, but nobody has indicated anything to the contrary to me around the program.
Yeah, let's hope that's not true for sure. Like, Lord, hope not. But yeah, with Damien, that's he's another one of those decisions that we're kind of looking at here with where it goes, and maybe kind of surprised at this point that we haven't heard something. But I don't know. Like that's why I keep saying mid-May. Mid-May is when I kind of look at this thing being wrapped up and done. When is the portal deadline?
Ooh, I wish I had it in front of me, but unfortunately I have no notes. You have me and me only. So that might be a Steven question if he can pull that up.
Seems like the 1st of May, right? Is it the 1st of May, somewhere through there? Is that seem right, or is it later?
It feels later, I think. But that does, I don't know.
There's so many different deadlines that we usually have ingrained into our brains, but with this show as it is today, I think we have shown our ability to dip our toes in different pools and wear different hats today.
There might be a public pool here, actually. I have no idea. There's a porta potty right next door to me. I mean, there's
go dip your toes in that. Let's see how that works out for you.
That's kind of how I feel right now.
But you started this show in your office, and then you somehow, I think, moved to a different area of your home, and then you went mobile on me, and now you're in a park.
I'm versatile.
Yeah. I mean, you can play the 1, 2, the 3, the 4, and maybe even the 5.
A lot of people saying May 11th is the portal deadline. So that's almost a full month of time to decide whether or not. And I mean, that is right around the time that you start getting into the nitty gritty of. So the combine is midway through May. So that first week of May is kind of when you start talking to teams and getting more in depth and having the real sit down meetings before the combine. That
that makes, a lot of people that are trying to, testing the draft waters are going to test it and then get immediately told that they have no business being in the draft, go back to school. And then they will quickly decide to hit the portal. And there's going to be a whole new wave of other talent to keep an eye on. So
and
plenty of time.
And that's why I keep throwing out that deadline of mid to late May, like the 17th, 18th, 19th. That's why I keep coming back to. That's where I'd look for this roster to kind of be shaped and what it's going to be, and probably coaching staff by that point too. Because look, Jack, we know workouts and players arrive on campus there late May, early June, and then they're playing basketball a month later. So, I mean, there's Kentucky basketball in about 2.5, less than 3 months.
How excited are you for that? I know we're going way over. I'm all kind of just adding to time to make up for my loss driving aimlessly through Shelbyville, watching my bars go up and go in here. But the official dates for that Global Jam got announced, and I was told that they will be announced publicly on Friday. The press release and all that stuff with Cal announcing it and all that stuff that's going to come on Friday. Mid-July, an opportunity to play really, really impressive talent for this team, especially with so many young pieces. How important is it for them to kind of get this early test?
I think it's very important. I thought with the roster they had coming back this past year, with so many veteran pieces coming back, that wasn't the roster that needed the trip. I think one like this one is the one that needs it because of all those new faces that you're talking about, all those freshmen. And then two, given the way that the seasons have ended the last 2 years with not deep runs, I think getting Kentucky basketball on your screen and giving fans something to be excited about is good for the program. It's good PR for the program, but especially these young guys like DJ and Rob and Justin and Bradshaw and whatever Kentucky's roster looks like, Jack. I think it's good for them to get a taste of it, 3 or 4 months before it's officially part of Kentucky basketball, before they ever play an official game and put it in the books. And we don't know what that schedule is going to look like, but I have a feeling it's going to have some tough non-conference matchups there, and maybe some ones in road environments that we haven't seen before, depending on what they decide to do between the SEC and the ACC and everything there. That does start this year, right? If I'm not mistaken. Kentucky and Duke are like that. That's my guess. Like we're either going to Cameron Indoor or Duke's coming to Rupp. That would be my guess. And so getting that basketball against good quality competition that can and probably will beat them at points throughout that trip. I think that's going to be good, and it's going to be fun and exciting for the fans and the players too, and for us that gets to cover this program and gives us a look at them.
Well, it's been an eventful one. I guess Patrick Dunn, before we get out of here, says, does anybody know if ESPN or anyone televised the Global Jam? It wasn't this past year. They had it streamed, I think like Sportsnet or something had it streamed online, but it's Kentucky, and they never miss an opportunity to televise a University of Kentucky game, especially when they're dying for content and opportunity to fill time on television. They always figure out a way. So I'd be absolutely shocked if the SEC network or somebody doesn't make a run for it. But last year it was streamed, so worst case scenario, it'll be streamed by somebody to be able to get your eyes and ears on it. But I would be absolutely shocked if they don't make some type of make that happen. But I guess we'll see. Let's go on. I wish I had my other ad read, Andy Ludicky, and My Perfect Franchise. I don't have my long spiel, but he's great. Go make sure you go to him, and it is what it is, man. This today was what it was. I'll do a double ad read next time. I know even last time I was like, it sucks that I had to wait till the end of the show to do it, but unfortunately, circumstances are what they are. But shout out Andy Ludicky. He is the absolute best at myperfectfranchise.net. Sean, let's end this absolute fun show.
You almost witnessed me passing out because somebody walked up to my window just now and scared me to death. Me sitting here. So let's. If you saw me look over really funny, like startled me.
Oh yeah,
let's get out of here before something bad happens.
We'll be better next time, I swear. We'll see at this point when this stupid internet comes, because I absolutely hate every second of it. So anyway, Sean, where can fans find your work?
You can find my work at gobigbluecountry.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at GBBCountry.
Find me on Twitter as well, at Jack Pilgrim KSR. Reach out to me via email, jpilgrim at KentuckySportsRadio.com. With that, we'll be back next time for their Jam Pack Sources Say podcast. We will see you then.